So, Ali, I was listening to a podcast by Bill Johnson the other day.
Okay.
I haven't listened to him in ages, and I just had this thought, I need some Bill Johnson in my world today.
Okay. Fair enough.
Tuned in, and actually, yeah, I tuned in. I'm smiling now because he was talking about, what are we tuned
Oh,
into?
that's funny.
And he shared a metaphor that I just would love to bring to the space of the
Sure.
podcast.
Hmm.
So you're hearing this secondhand from me, but it was just such a great metaphor. Um, anyway, Al, you jump in if I'm saying something wrong because you are the musician of the two of us in the
Oh,
room,
not
because
even
the
close.
metaphor was all
Yeah.
around musical instruments. And he was saying that it's possible to, if you're in a room with a whole lot of musos, and let's just
Mm-hmm.
say you've got the guitar and you decide that you're going to tune your guitar. So you strum one of the notes on your guitar,
Mm-hmm.
and you then tune your guitar to that string, that
Mm-hmm.
note.
Sure.
And then you invite the other musicians in the room to tune their instruments
To your
to
guitar.
your
Mm-hmm.
guitar that's just tuned. And then if you all start playing a tune, that is going to sound like it's in harmony because you've all tuned into this guitar.
Mm.
However, to the person who is not tone deaf like I am, unfortunately, they're going to hear that there's something perhaps not quite right. Because what if
Mm.
that first note on your guitar wasn't actually in tune in the first place?
Yeah.
So now you've tuned everything else out to a note that wasn't perhaps quite right. So the
Mm.
group sounds in harmony and the tune you'll recognize, but
Mm.
something just will sound a little bit flat, perhaps.
Yeah.
And yet, if you start with tuning a tuning fork
Mm.
and then you tune your guitar to your, well, you tune that first note to the tune of the tuning fork,
Mm.
which is the correct pitch and tone and what have you. And then everybody else tunes their instrument to the
To
tuning
that.
fork.
Yeah.
Then when you start to play, yes, it will still be in a tune that's in harmony, but it's going to sound even to the musician's ear, it's going to
Mm.
sound right, like it's tuned
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
And so why share the story? Why even
Mm.
bother? And it's a metaphor to, like, in life, what are we tuned into?
Yeah.
And it's possible. And I've experienced this before where I've joined a group of people that are all in agreement. So they're all in harmony and in agreement to
Mm.
something. And something about it hasn't quite sort of sat
Mm.
completely well with me, but I've kind of gone with it because I'm like, well, everybody else is agreeing with this, so
Mm.
I'm gonna join them and agree anyway.
Mm.
And that's like the first scenario where
Mm.
you tune into a note that's kind of not quite, you know,
Mm.
on the spot. And back in the day, years back when I was so confused, I suppose, about who I am and what I wanted to be, I was such a people pleaser. And
Mm.
in the people pleasing space, I was a pro at tuning into other people's
Yeah.
instruments because
Yeah.
I just wanted to fit in
Yeah.
and I just
Didn't want
wanted to
any
be,
conflict, didn't want any
yes,
clash of sound. You wanted it to harmonize. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. But without the insight that I didn't actually, the starting point is the tuning fork.
Yeah.
And what is the tuning fork that you want to be tuned into?
Mm.
And goodness me, like my whole personal development journey took, I suppose, the journey towards discovering that tuning fork. And, that's all around identity and who am I and what are my values. And for me, it's tuning into the voice of God,
Yeah.
and sometimes being okay with um, being tuned into a different note to
Everybody else.
the other people in the space.
Yeah.
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 And how do you feel about coming in and then being the tune that doesn't harmonize with everybody else?
Yeah. I I know that I've walked into a room before and gone, ah, there's nothing wrong in the room,
Mm,
but I could feel that something's not quite right. Like that, there's that almost not really a conflict, but almost a conflict in my gut. where I've gone,
Yeah,
there's, you can't put your finger on it.
yeah,
But that metaphor has nailed that because it's the fact that there can be this harmony, but it might not fit with us
yeah.
for whatever reason. And wow, I'm just kind of letting that sit with me for a second
Oh,
because what does it look like? Like if you said tuning in to the tuning fork, what is that for you? And absolutely tuning into God. And I think we must need to know our values to know what we're tuning into. Is that
spot
is
on. Absolutely. I think that's definitely a part of it,
mm,
and that's why I think in the past, especially in our first year on the podcast, we spoke a lot
yeah, a
about
lot. Mm,
values and knowing and if you're tuning in for the first time or you're tuning in, and you've perhaps haven't been here for a while, what do we talk about when we talk about values? It's simply knowing for yourself, as an individual, what is important
mm,
to you,
mm,
what is your starting point? What are your foundations that you
mm.
want to live your life by?
Yeah,
And if you're not clear with what those are for you,
yeah.
then it's very likely that you're going to tune yourself to the room,
What
the
everybody else
harmony
is
in the room,
doing.
what everybody else is doing. Yeah.
Mm. So there's great strength in working out who and what we're tuning ourselves to, our lives to.
Yeah, and I think also like what he was talking about, I mean, it was a whole, I think, a 45-minute thing I listened to. And perhaps I'll send you the link, Ali, that we can drop the link to
Yeah,
that
for sure. That'd be
conversation in
good.
the show notes. Yeah, so we'll do that if you're interested to go and listen to what he shared. But he spoke also about unity. And so I think
Mm.
when we're tuned, when like let's say for example, you and I decide to tune into to God and our values, and
Hmm.
and then we walk into a room or you walk into a space and you recognize, as you said, nothing's wrong, but something's not quite right either.
Mm.
Um, his encouragement was it's not a judgment about, well, they're wrong and I'm right.
Yeah.
It's about, okay, so again, getting curious.
Mm.
And then he then goes on and he shared something about, so you could be like a thermometer where you can read the temperature in the room.
Yeah.
You can go and just observe and notice and then walk away and nothing's changed. And maybe that's
Okay.
fine. Maybe there's a
Yeah.
place that's wisdom, that's fine. It's not about
Mm.
changing anybody else. And it might not be like you're judging them, but you're just choosing, well, that's not where you want to be tuned into.
Yeah.
And that's fine. So you're going to choose to go somewhere else and tune, find more your people. But
Mm.
he said, and then there's also a time when, when is it the time to not only be like the thermometer where you read the room, but when is it the time to be the thermostat where
Mm.
you actually can influence
Wow.
the space?
Mm.
So, there are a whole lot of, I think, pieces of awareness in what he was sharing, which I just really loved. And I think the first one is, what am I tuned into? And
Yeah.
the second awareness is, okay, so when I'm in a space where I feel like my circumstances are not tuned into what I'm tuned into, am I going to allow the circumstances to win me over and sway me over? And,
Mm.
then I'm no longer tuned into to where my values are and what I want to be aligned with.
Yeah.
And is there space in these circumstances for me to have impact?
Yeah.
What is my influence and impact in the space?
Wow. What instantly comes up for me is like workplaces, culture in a workplace, right? Or a school's culture. And um, if culture is something that that there's potentially room to, if you, I've certainly been in workplaces where the culture's not been a positive culture,
Yes, absolutely. I think we all,
where
I think that's, yeah, we all have probably, yeah.
and I think there's absolutely room for us to work out and to have this conversation and go, okay, well, how can I be a thermostat? Because often we can't change jobs easily necessarily. And
Yeah,
just because there's a
yeah,
culture that's not quite right doesn't necessarily, it could mean, you know what, that's not for me. But it might be, okay, well, what can I do? What can I bring? How can we be the change in this place?
yes.
And I think that's a really great conversation.
And even the awareness of, you know what, it's okay
Mm,
if I'm working in this is my
mm,
job, this is my income, this is what I've said yes to for the season, and yet, I face this
mm.
culture that's not quite right.
Yeah.
Even though for me the awareness is, so I don't have to tune into this culture that I'm
No,
not
that's
really
right.
aligned with. I mean, even that for me was is like a light bulb. Like
Yeah,
it's okay to not become part of
that's
that.
right.
And yet how do I explore being a thermostat and having influence in
Mm.
a place that brings unity, and it's not about, they're wrong,
You're
I'm right.
wrong. That's right.
Yeah,
And as I think when if we've done the work and we know our values and we are prepared to feel uncomfortable and show up as ourselves in a way that we've spoken about over the last few weeks about not bringing judgment,
yeah,
all of those things, and we show up authentically as ourselves, providing a safe space, people will notice there's something different. I had someone talk to me from the rehab the other day and they said, oh, there's just a different energy. There's something about you. And it's not, firstly, it's definitely God, it's not me. But secondly, there's a difference. Like I'm not going in there and pointing out every time everyone's, swearing and the things that they're talking about that might be inappropriate or any of those
yeah,
things.
yeah,
Just being there
yeah,
authentically as me, knowing what my values are and how I want to be present, it's noticed. And I
yeah,
think the encouragement here is to be a thermostat. It's often not about going and quickly trying to change the temperature. It is
yes,
reading it, but it's going, okay, well, how can I safely be in this space as me that's still judgment free?
yeah,
Because you're right, it's not about being right or wrong. And sometimes it is. Sometimes cultures and things are completely wrong.
yeah,
But if we're
yeah.
going, like what we said last week as a parent to our kids, if we're just going to point everything out and tell people how it is, that's not going to change it.
No,
What's that saying? We've got to be the change. It's about how we be.
yeah, yeah. And it's not always easy because sometimes, I
No.
mean, I know for me as a recovering people pleaser, my tendency is
Yeah.
to join the crowd,
Yeah.
to tune into especially if I feel like I'm outnumbered, and the majority is
Mm.
sort of in a different space. It's so easy for me if I'm not being intentional and aware to slip into not being myself.
Yeah.
And I've caught myself doing that without realizing it at the time, but it's after the
Yeah.
fact. And then I look back and I go, what was I,
Ah.
like, what just happened? Um, but thankfully that kind of awareness is also a step in the right direction.
Mm.
Because I think if we become aware that this is our tendency, awareness is key to making any
Mm.
change.
Mm.
Yeah. So Al, if how would you go about then um encouraging someone like if you feeling in that space that you
Mm.
know yeah, the culture's not optimal. Do you have any tips of like how do we be authentic in that space?
I think part of it is to be okay to start with, feeling uncomfortable and that you don't necessarily fit in because your values and because your culture is naturally different. I think to realize that it's okay to be different
Mm,
and that to me is probably the first thing is to, yeah, it would be to realize that. Because if we're worried about fitting in and being the people pleaser, then we're going to be very uncomfortable and we're probably just going to, I don't know, walk away. We're not going to be the thermostat. But if we're feeling like,
Right.
okay, we want to be in that space, is to be okay with being uncomfortable. And then to know that we are who we're supposed to be. We're and be and have some confidence, which is tricky because I still lack confidence every day. But it's to know, okay, I'm here for this season. I know who I am. And if you don't know who you are, if you don't know what your values are, chat with Kath and I. Go
Yeah,
back
that's
to
actually,
the
yeah,
early days and of our
yeah.
podcast. We've got plenty of resources in the show notes around what are your values, what is important to you. But yeah, to be okay with being uncomfortable and to know who you are and to be who you are in a loving way. It's not our job to fix everything. We don't have to
No,
necessarily fix things, but if we show up as who we are, we have influence. We can't control everything, but we can influence.
yeah, I love that. I remember, like, listening to you share, the just sort of two stories and two incidents that, so the first one I remember so clearly at one point in my life being in a workplace where I definitely tuned into someone else's tuning fork,
Mm,
sorry, someone else's note on their guitar rather than the tuning fork I wanted to tune into. And
mm,
I remember becoming like a chameleon in that space and people
mm.
pleasing and being not authentic to myself. And in the moment, it was the least sort of confronting way to be. For me,
Yeah,
it felt safer. It felt safer to morph and to be a chameleon and just to be who that
yeah.
others were. But then the challenge was a couple of months down the line. I
Mm,
mean, this was exhausting because now every day I'm showing up to work and I'm not being true to myself and I'm
yeah.
being who I'm not. And eventually, one day, I remember being really short and quite snappy at a poor colleague of mine because I had just had enough. Like I
Mm,
just was really exhausted about putting on this facade that
yeah,
I said a whole lot of stuff that was hurtful.
yeah,
And I just escalated this into like I made the problem so much bigger than it needed to be
yeah.
because I was trying to be someone that actually
Mm,
wasn't true to me. And had I, right from the get-go, had the courage to be uncomfortable and to be vulnerable and to be different and just to
mm,
stand my ground, tuned into my
mm,
values and
mm.
the tuning fork I wanted to tune into, it would have saved all this other drama that happened down the line because this other person, and it wasn't their fault, like they thought I was completely someone who I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I had led them to believe that I was
Mm,
not that person. So, I mean, that was a huge lesson,
yeah.
definitely, for me to learn. Um, and, and now as I'm sharing that, I've actually completely forgotten the second point I wanted to make. But I think the
Yeah.
encouragement is
Yeah.
that yeah, even if it's difficult in the moment,
Mm. It's worth it.
it's worth it for sure.
Yeah. And we can
For
do
sure.
it in ways that's not being obnoxious or arrogant that because it's not our way or their way. Like one's right, one's wrong. We can be different. And we can just quietly and calmly be different.
You've just spot on hit the nail. That was the second thing I wanted to bring.
There you go. Well
I
done. What was
remember,
it?
I remember, I remember, and it was actually in that same season. So clearly, I hadn't been for coaching it and discovered, who I actually am and what my values are and who my tuning fork is. But I remember also joining a networking thing where I walked in and I remember feeling exactly what you've just shared, like feeling like
Mm,
I'm right and they're wrong.
mm,
And that's like kind of stepping into this sort of dangerous, sort of self-righteous kind of space of going, oh,
mm.
well. And I remember walking away feeling it like it's them and it's me,
Yeah.
and it was and I remember feeling all icky about it.
Mm.
So, I mean, how did I fix that? Well, I just never went back. Kind of just, it's
Well,
a
that
sexy
solved
thing, but I
it.
just solved it by like not going back again. But you are so right. So if you're tuning in and listening, it's almost like two ends of the spectrum, where the one end of
Mm,
the spectrum is you're becoming like and people pleasing, and the other end you're judging and you're saying, oh well, I'm
mm,
right, they're wrong.
mm,
But it's this whole other way of being
mm.
that's yeah, I think I'm still navigating and still trying to work out what that is.
Yeah.
But it's how do we be? And I think that's why listening to Bill Johnson this weekend was so eye-opening, because I thought, okay.
Mm,
So, and I think when I'm just thinking about it more, I think for me it's what are you focusing on? And if I
mm,
take my focus off trying to fit in,
mm,
and I take my focus off being right and someone else being wrong and all judgy,
mm,
and instead put my focus on showing up and being
mm.
values aligned
Yeah.
and praying about God to kind of give me words and a way of being.
Yeah.
I think that feels different.
It does feel different. And I think it completely aligns with the conversation we had last week about providing that space for people.
Yeah.
And how much more of an influence as a parent do we have with our children when we are authentic and we live how we know to live, and they're witnessing us, and then they're working it out on their own, and we're providing that safe place. The influence that we have with our family and people in our world is so much greater than standing there and telling people and trying to fix everything. If we went into a workplace that had a poor culture and we just went in and said, this is what's wrong and this is what needs to be right, unless we were there acting it out and being part of it and being the thermostat, being the change, you can't point fingers and fix it and think it's going to change. It's just not. That's not how it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love the metaphor about the thermostat
Yeah.
changing. Yeah. And I'm thinking, okay, so in the workplace, in our families, in our friends, in the coaching space, in the podcast, I mean, we talk about it's real life with Kath. We don't have all the answers, people. Yeah.
We often have our own light bulb moments when we have these
Every
conversations, don't we?
time. Hmm.
Yeah. So I think, the take home today is it's that what are we tuned into?
Yeah.
And the tuning fork.
Yeah.
What is that? And if that's the starting point
Mm.
for how you want to be and who you want to be,
Mm.
and if that's where we're focusing our energy,
Yeah.
and rather than trying to, pointing fingers and fixing other people or trying to be
Mm.
other people and trying to compare ourselves with other people, goodness me, all that is like
Mm.
exhausting,
It is exhausting.
Um, and we're not going to get it right all the time, but as we shared last week or a couple of weeks ago, it's not about getting it right.
It's definitely not about getting it right. Yeah, what was that when we answered the question, what's holding us back? Perfection. We're not going to get it right. We're not going to ever be
Yeah,
perfect. And it's not about that. It's, yeah, deciding who do we want to be? How do we want to show up? What are we tuning
yeah,
into? And I know I don't want to tune into culture of today because I'm not going to get all political, but the world is changing dramatically, and we need to know who we are so that we can stay tuned into what's important to us. Not to necessarily point fingers to everybody else, but we need to be authentically us and influence the people in our world that that's our job, that's our mission. It's part of why we're here.
yeah. And you know what? I'm also just thinking about, part of why we're here and our sort of it's become a kind of tagline for us in the podcast is, go
Mm,
where the life is. And
yeah.
I think tuning into the tuning fork is going where
Going
the
with the
life
life.
is.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Because I
Mm,
think if the more we can practice being true to who we are,
mm,
in a way that invites and influences others to the space of, it's a loving, judging-free, safe space,
yeah.
and as much as what we can allow to be that, then yeah, that's a much more resourceful
Mm,
way, I think, to show up than either ends of the spectrum.
perfect. Beautiful. I think that's where we'll finish it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope you that's encouraged you today. I know it's been a great reminder for me. Again, we don't need to fix it. We need to
Yeah.
just focus on where we're tuned. And what a great reminder today to think about who we're tuning into, what we're tuning into. And thanks for sharing with us today, Kath.
Oh, pleasure. And if you have been listening, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah.
Um, what are you tuned into? What helped?
Yeah.
And also, if there are any conversations or topics that you'd love us to talk about, we'd also love to
Hmm.
hear from you. So, yeah,
Yes, we
drop us a
totally
line.
would. Fabulous.
Thanks,
All right.
Al.
Okay. Thanks, Kath. Have a
See you
great
next
week.
time.
Bye.
Bye.